Murder at the Lighthouse Inn. I was the only one without an alibi. 10 people are trapped in a lighthouse Inn during the worst storm in decades. 1 body, 9 suspects, and me. I couldn't account for my own whereabouts during the time of death. Okay, this is the case that nearly destroyed my career, and what I uncovered that night still keeps me up some nights. Okay, I'm Lucien Hart, and this is the story of how I went from detective to murder suspect in less than 8 hours. Look, I've worked a lot of cases. It's 20 years on the job. You see things that change you. But nothing prepared me for November 14th, 2019. I walked into the lighthouse Inn thinking I'd finally get some sleep, maybe clear my head after a rough case in Boston. Instead, I woke up to a dead body and 9 people who all thought I was the killer. This is my account of what really happened that night, how I solved a murder while being the prime suspect, and why sometimes the most obvious answer is the one everyone misses. Let me take you through it, step by step. The Lighthouse Inn sits on Cape Mortimer in northern Maine. I picked it specifically because it was isolated. It's quiet, the kind of place where nobody would bother me. I checked in on November 13th, barely looked at the other guests. I just wanted to sleep. The place had been around since the 20s, one of those old coastal buildings that somehow survived everything the ocean threw at it. I should have paid more attention to who else was staying there, but I was exhausted, running on fumes, and I just wanted to disconnect. So I didn't notice the tech millionaire, the retired judge, the novelist, the anniversary couple, the college kid, the chef, the artist, and I definitely didn't notice Margaret Holloway. That was my first mistake. Storm hit around 8 p.m. on the 14th. I was in my room, actually managing to relax for the first time in weeks when the lights went out. Then the wind started really howling. I've been through bad weather before, but this was different. You could feel the building shaking. The ocean sounded like it was trying to tear the foundation apart. I remember thinking this was exactly what I needed. Complete isolation. No way for anyone to reach me with another case. Power died at 8:47. Phone lines at 9:15. The road flooded completely by 10 p.m. We were stuck. I found out later that the inn's owner, Thomas Crane, tried to keep everyone calm, but people were nervous. Being trapped in an old building during a storm like that, it gets to you. I went to bed around 11 p.m. Fell asleep almost immediately. That was my second mistake. The scream woke me up at 6:23 a.m. I knew that sound. I've heard it too many times. One had found a body. I pulled on my pants and ran downstairs. A kid, who couldn't have been more than 20, was standing in the doorway of the library, shaking. His name was Ryan Moss. He just kept pointing inside and couldn't form words. I pushed past him and saw her. A woman in her 40s, slumped in a leather chair by the window, a letter opener in her chest. Blood had dried, which meant she'd been dead for hours. I checked for a pulse anyway. Force of habit. Nothing. I looked around the room, started processing the scene automatically. Then Thomas Crane appeared behind me, and everything got complicated. "We need to call the police," he said. I told him the phones were dead. Started panicking, talking about boats and emergency signals, and I had to cut him off. I identified myself as a detective, told everyone to stay calm, and said I'd handle it until we could get real help. Okay. That's when I made my third mistake. I should have kept my mouth shut. The moment they knew I was a detective, I became responsible for everything that followed. I examined the body more carefully. Based on temperature and rigor mortis, I estimated the time of death between midnight and 2 a.m. 2-hour window. I needed to establish where everyone was during that time. Simple procedure. I'd done it 1,000 times, except this time, I was one of the people who needed an alibi. I gathered everyone in the common room. 10 people total, minus the victim, so 9. I started with the basics. Who was Margaret Holloway? Nobody seemed to know much about her. She'd kept to herself, had dinner alone, and gone upstairs early. I checked her room, found her laptop was missing. That was strange. Everything else was untouched. but the laptop was gone. I started the interviews. Thomas Crane said he was in his private quarters on the first floor, alone, no witnesses. Okay, he's 73 with bad knees, but I've seen older people commit murder. Cage doesn't eliminate anyone. Vincent Shaw, the tech guy, claimed he was in his room directly above the library, working on his laptop until the battery died, then writing notes by hand, alone, no witnesses. Judge Patricia Hendricks said she took a sleeping pill at 11 p.m. and didn't wake up until morning. I found the pills in her room, so that part checked out. Did she actually take one? I couldn't prove it either way. David and Elena Pritchard, the married couple, said they were together all night in their room. That's a mutual alibi, the strongest one I had. But I've seen spouses lie for each other more times than I can count. Ryan Moss, the kid who found the body, said he was reading by candlelight until about 1 a.m., then fell asleep. No witnesses. Marcus Webb, the chef, claimed he was drunk, said he passed out around 11:30 after finishing half a bottle of whiskey. The bottle was there, half empty, but being drunk isn't an alibi. Isabella Cortez, the artist, said she was sketching in her room, lost track of time, showed me her sketchbook with drawings dated that night, but those could have been backdated. Then I got to myself. Where was I between midnight and 2 a.m.? Asleep, in my room, alone, no witnesses. I could see it in their faces, the way they were looking at me. I was the detective, which meant I was trained to kill efficiently. I was alone with no alibi, and I had the skills to stage a crime scene. I was starting to look like the best suspect in the room. That's when Judge Hendricks asked the question I'd been dreading. Detective Hart, did you know the victim? I could have lied, part of me wanted to, but I've built my career on honesty, even when it hurts. So I told them the truth. Yes, I knew who Margaret Holloway was. She was a journalist, okay? And she'd been investigating me for 6 months. The room went silent. I explained everything. 5 years ago, I worked a case where I was accused of planting evidence. This internal investigation cleared me. Charges were dropped, but Holloway didn't believe it. She thought I was dirty. She'd been building a story to expose me. And yes, I knew she was staying at the inn. I'd seen her name in the guest book when I checked in. But I swear it was a coincidence. I had no idea she'd be here when I made my reservation weeks earlier. I could hear exactly how that sounded. I'm a detective. I know how to read guilty behavior, and everything about my situation screamed guilt, motive, opportunity, no alibi, professional knowledge of how to commit and cover up murder. If I were investigating this case and someone else were in my position, I'd have them in handcuffs already. But here's the thing about being on the other side of an investigation. It forces you to think differently. I couldn't just build a case against someone else and hope that would clear me. I needed to find the actual truth. So I did what I always do, dug deeper. Okay, I went back to the library, examined everything again. The murder weapon was a letter opener from the desk. Wiped clean, no prints. Professional worker or someone who watches a lot of crime shows. Holloway was facing the door when she died. She saw her killer coming. No defensive wounds, no signs of struggle. Either she knew them and didn't feel threatened, or the attack was so fast she couldn't react. The letter opener went directly between her ribs into her heart. Clean strike, lucky or skilled, I couldn't tell which. But something else caught my attention. The fireplace. There was ash in it, still warm. Someone had built a fire during the night. In November, in Maine, that's not unusual, but the power was out. Why would someone need a fire in the library specifically? I started digging into connections between the victim and the other guests. This is where being a detective actually helped me. I had my phone, and even with the cell towers down, I had enough battery to access some cached data and offline resources. What I found made everything worse before it made anything better. Vincent Shaw, his company, had been sued 2 years ago, costing him $30 million. Holloway had written a favorable piece about the firm that sued him. The publicity from her article had helped expose his company's vulnerabilities. Shaw had reason to hate her. Judge Hendricks had presided over a case involving Holloway's brother 15 years back. The brother got 12 years, died in prison. Hendricks claimed she barely remembered it, but Holloway had written about the case multiple times. She thought the sentence was excessive. David Pritchard worked in finance. Holloway had exposed a Ponzi scheme at his former firm. He wasn't directly implicated, but his career took a major hit. Several colleagues went to prison. He had to rebuild from scratch. Ryan Moss's father had been investigated for embezzlement 3 years ago. Holloway covered the story extensively. The father committed suicide before trial. I found old social media posts from Ryan expressing rage at journalists who destroyed his father's reputation. Marcus Webb's restaurant nearly went under after Holloway wrote a brutal review 4 years ago. He'd recovered, but that kind of financial devastation leaves scars. Isabella Cortez seemed clean at first. I spent hours looking for a connection and found nothing. Then there was Thomas Crane. Holloway had stayed at the inn 6 months earlier, wrote a blog post mentioning safety concerns. Code enforcement showed up, forced Crane to spend $50,000 on renovations. He'd been furious. 9 people. Every single one had a reason to want Margaret Holloway dead. And the 10th person, me, looked the most guilty of all. I was stuck in a nightmare. I was the only one trained to solve this, but I was also the primary suspect. Every move I made, every question I asked, I could see them wondering if I was covering my own tracks. I couldn't sleep that second night. The storm was still raging. We were still trapped, and I kept running through everything in my mind. Why here? Why now? If any of these people wanted Holloway dead, why do it at a remote inn during a storm that trapped them with a detective? It didn't make sense unless that was the point. Unless someone knew I'd be here and wanted me to take the fall. But who could have known? I'd made my reservation on impulse, barely told anyone I was coming here. Unless someone had been watching me, tracking my movements. But that level of premeditation meant this wasn't just about killing Holloway. This was about framing me. Then I remembered the laptop. Holloway's missing laptop wasn't just evidence of her investigation into me. It would have had everything. All her research on everyone. That laptop was the key. The killer needed it. But why take it? Why not just leave it in her room? Because they needed to destroy it. And with the power out, they couldn't just wipe it remotely or delete files safely. They needed to physically destroy it. Okay. And suddenly, the fireplace made sense. I went back upstairs to the library, used my phone's flashlight to examine the ash more carefully. I sifted through it with a pencil, and there it was. Melted plastic, twisted metal, the remains of a hard drive. Someone had burned the laptop. But that takes time. Can't just toss it in and walk away. You need to feed the fire, make sure it gets hot enough, and ensure everything melts. 20 to 30 minutes minimum. That changed everything. This wasn't a quick murder. This was methodical. The killer spent half an hour in this room, burning evidence while Holloway's body cooled in the chair. I called everyone back to the common room. Laid out what I'd found. Some of them looked confused. Others looked scared. The one person looked resigned. Thomas Crane, the old man who owned the inn. I watched his face as I explained the timeline, the planning, the deliberate destruction of evidence, and I saw him accept what was coming. I confronted him directly, asked him how well he knew the fireplace in the library. He'd been struggling with it the day I arrived, trying to get it started for guests. He knew exactly how to build a fire that would burn hot and fast. I asked him where Holloway's laptop was before it was destroyed. Did he take it from her room before or after he killed her? Crane didn't fight it. He just started talking. He told me everything. How Holloway's blog posts had nearly destroyed him. The code enforcement visit, the fines, and the renovations drained his savings. The inn was his whole life. He'd built everything around it, and she'd almost taken it away with a few careless words online. Hey, when he saw her name on the reservation list, something broke inside him. He'd been planning it for weeks, waiting for the right conditions. When the storm warnings came, he knew it was time. He'd approached her that night, told her there was a problem with the building, and led her to the library under the pretense of showing her something. She'd trusted him. He was just a harmless old man. He grabbed the letter opener the moment her back was turned, one thrust straight to the heart. She died quickly, he said, like that made it better. Then he took her laptop, started the fire, and burned everything. Not just the research on me, everything. She'd been investigating multiple people, building multiple stories. He destroyed it all, went back to his quarters, cleaned up, and waited for morning. He thought it would be ruled an accident or remain unsolved. The storm, the isolation, the confusion. He never expected a detective to be staying at the inn that weekend. When I identified myself, he knew he was in trouble. But he also saw an opportunity. If he could make me look guilty, if everyone suspected me, maybe he could still get away with it. Okay, it was a quiet confession. No tears, no drama. Just a tired old man explaining why he destroyed everything he'd spent his life building. He'd kill to protect the inn, and now the inn would be forever marked by murder. There was something almost poetic about it, in a horrible way. The storm broke on November 16th. Police arrived by boat, took Crane into custody. I gave my statement, turned over all my evidence, and watched them take him away. The other guests left as quickly as they could. Nobody wanted to stay another minute in that building. I was the last one to leave. Stood in the library one more time, looking at the chair where Holloway had died, thinking about how close I'd come to being arrested for her murder. My reputation took a hit anyway. The media loved the story. Detectives suspected of murder. Even though I was cleared, even though Crane confessed, some people still believe I was involved somehow. I've learned to live with it. You can't control what people think. You can only control what you know to be true. The Lighthouse Inn closed 6 months later. It sits empty now, boarded up, forgotten. I drive past it sometimes when I'm in Maine. Never stop, never go inside. Some places carry too much weight. Cases leave marks that don't fade. This one changed how I see my work, because for the first time, I understood what it felt like to be on the other side. To be innocent and watch everyone assume you're guilty. To have the truth and know nobody believes you. I still work cases. I still solve murders, but now I'm more careful about assumptions. More aware that the most obvious suspect isn't always the guilty one. Sometimes, the person who looks the most guilty is just the person in the wrong place at the wrong time. And sometimes, the real killer is the one nobody's looking at because they seem too harmless, too old, too innocent. Thomas Crane taught me that. And Margaret Holloway paid for that lesson with her life. I think about her sometimes, wondered what story she would have written if she'd lived. She was wrong about me, but she was a good journalist. She asked hard questions. She held people accountable. The world needs people like that, even when they make mistakes, especially when they make mistakes. I've got dozens of cases like this in my files. Locked room mysteries, impossible crimes, murders that shouldn't have been solvable, but they all have one thing in common. The truth is always there, somewhere, waiting for someone patient enough to find it. I've spent 20 years being that patient person, And even when I was a suspect, even when my own freedom was on the line, I kept digging until I found the answer. That's what separates a good detective from everyone else. The refusal to stop, no matter what it costs you. Subscribe for more from the Hart Files.